Okay, so it's 1983. Imagine yourself in the rural Midwest, and what music do you have access to? Um, you have access to what's in your friend's record collection, what gets played on the radio, etc. Maybe what other kids are playing at parties. And I was in high school. I knew that I was going to go to college and study music by that time, and I was getting interested in different styles and things like that. And I remember my biology teacher talking about progressive rock one time, and I didn't really know what it was yet, even though I had listened to Rush and all that. Like, I didn't make the connection. Oh, it's a specific style, and there's all these other bands, and that's where he kind of said, "Oh yeah, progressive rock. That's like ELP, Rush, Genesis, Yes, all these groups," which I ended up being quite interested in after that. So fast forward, the radio station, I think it was KC 95 in St. Louis. They used to do like a featured album one night a week, I think it was, where they would play in its entirety, probably with a commercial break in between the two sides. They would play a full album. And what people used to do back in the 1980s, before there was Napster, before there was, Bandcamp or any of these other things, is you would get your cassette deck and you would record the radio program, and then that's how you would first acquire the album. Especially because the nearest record store to where I grew up was about 60 miles away, a real record store. Um, some of those department stores used to have recordings, but then you were just stuck with whatever they had, as opposed to a real record store that had this much deeper selection. So that's how I first heard this. This album got played on the radio, and I first heard it, and it it was just amazing to me. And musically, emotionally, it really reached me, um, because there's just so much nuance, um, to the music, especially the keyboard playing. And this is a recording that it's not only the synthesizers. I mean, just everything you could possibly do with a keyboard instrument, and as well as anyone had ever done it, in my opinion. It, that's kind of a bold statement, but I mean, in terms of just being so, um, musically expressive and kind of all these different styles that made up the overall sound of this group, it was really significant. And I'm going to start it now. The title cut from Trilogy, Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
I've tried to mend the love that ended long ago, although we still pretend our love is surely coming to an end. Don't waste the time, you've got to love again. We tried to lie, but you and I know better than to let each other lie. The thought of lying to you makes me cry, counting up the time that's passed us by. I've sent this letter hoping it will reach your hand, and if it does, I hope that you will understand that I must leave in a while. And though I smile, you know the smile is only there to hide what I'm really feeling deep inside. Just a face where I can hang my pride.
Okay, it's kind of an odd place to stop it, but I didn't want to interrupt the cadenza, and I wanted to have this cadenza flow into the next section. Um, it's hard to even talk about how much I love this. So um, there's just so much nuance in Keith's playing, and all of the little things with the stretching of the time and the tempo in that with the vocal. I don't know how they recorded it. It almost sounds like they did it together at the same time because they're so tight together. I mean, it's possible that he recorded the piano tracks and then Greg, maybe did multiple takes of the vocal over that. Um, you know, After you listen to it enough times, he could probably get a feel for where the different, like the retard where he stretches the time a little bit, and etc. But I mean, the phrasing is just so amazing on all of this stuff, and I mean, any element that you want to talk about in music is in Keith's playing. He has all the nuance, the voice leading, um, his improvisation, and more than any of the other, I don't know, main progressive rock guys at that time. I think he had this really eclectic style where the classical influence was so deep. I would say the nuance in Keith's piano playing is along the lines of somebody like a Keith Jarrett on the jazz side, or I mean, I don't want to say quite maybe Vladimir Horowitz because I mean he's like the master, but I mean he's approaching that level of musical communication. It's really stunning, this piece, and and I just think that he really was the whole package. And then this is probably the first piece where I heard the Moog modular on anything, because I heard this before I had heard Lucky Man. And let's go into the cadenza, and I'll find a good place to stop it later if I talk more. yeah, it's a place to stop it. But wow, so I love that section. It's almost like Dave Brubeck Blue Rondo a la Turk on steroids or something. And actually, I could have a little more of the lead on there in the mix. That the lead is really amazing that he plays there, and the runs and all the vibrato with the modulation there. I mean, it's just an amazing solo, and that bass is just so heavy. So back in the day, I used to have these giant speakers that had like 15-inch woofers, four-way speakers, and I'm telling you, if you put this on, if you want to impress your friends, you put that track on and just put it up really loud, and you shake the whole house with it. It was just massive. I eventually ended up being more interested in speakers that had were better for different styles of music and jazz, and that were a little more nuanced than that. But I'll tell you that there's nothing like hearing this on like a really good stereo system. I do have the subwoofer now. Maybe this weekend I'll plug it in and put this on and just rock out to it a little bit, because it is so amazing. And again, it's all these different elements in Keith's playing. And this is the track that I picked, and it was one of the first ones I thought of, but I wanted to do a few of these before I got into this, because it's still hard to talk about losing Keith. I remember when I found out that Keith had passed, I was looking at some stuff on YouTube, and I stumbled on these videos from Rachel Flowers, and she did a version of this, and I cried like a baby. It was so cathartic, because I don't think we were ready to let Keith go. And what was really moving for me about her performance, and I'll put a link to it in the description of the video, is that she had really captured the nuances of Keith's playing in her performance. And it was just such a beautiful, moving tribute. And it was, like I said, it was just, I was like I was just like a puddle of tears at that point, because, it was just when everybody had found out what, that Keith was gone, and I think it really hit home to me just how much in my whatever life experience with music at that time, when I heard Emerson, Lake and Palmer, how much I really appreciated it. It's somebody that over the years, I think certain recordings of them have really stuck with me, like this, Tarkus, and then some of the other ones maybe were kind of a little over the top. And and I got really heavily into jazz in college, so I was listening to all acoustic music and all this stuff, and I kind of got away from some of the progness for a while. But listening back to this, it's like, every element that you could possibly want in music is not only in this group, but on this album and in this one track. It just has so many facets to it, and the transitions are just amazing from the different sections, and that's what I really love about this piece. So we're gonna jump into the rest of it, and I'm not gonna pause it anymore.
You'll see the day another way, and wake up with the sunshine pouring right down where you lay.
Yeah, man. And I mean Carl Palmer's percussion work on throughout that, and Greg Lake's vocals and bass playing are just superb on this too. Especially his vocal in the first section. I mean, this is heavenly. I love Greg singing in this band. And I was familiar with Greg Lake from Emerson, Lake and Palmer before I had ever heard him with King Crimson, and I really loved his vocal style, and I think this track really just features every kind of element that you hear in the band's music. Um, just fully integrated. Because I think with a lot of bands that have an eclectic style or influences, you'll hear like, well, this section is this way, this section is that way. Here's like the more jazz part. Here's like the more prog part. And with a song like Trilogy, I think it was really interwoven and integrated where the flow is so good, and that's why I wanted to pick this one. Um, and I also thought it would be good to kind of get away from doing all the jazz and the jazz funk things, because I mean I could do videos on so many of those because I love that music a lot, and it's like, okay, I need to go back and hit on some of the other prog masterpieces, um, because there's just really a lot of amazing synthesizer work there that I think influenced a lot of people. I mean, let's face it. You know, the 1980s, which obviously was when I was a very, it was a very formative time in my listening because um, of my age and all of that. And that was an amazing time for synthesizers, but really the groundwork for all of that was basically laid in like the end of the 1960s and the early 1970s, because that's where you really started hearing all of these bands incorporate synthesizers into their recordings. And I think that you know Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and the Trilogy album in particular is just a real watershed moment in terms of that. Um, just bringing it all together, all of the pieces, the different stylistic things, and again, just so much musicianship on everybody's part, and in particular with Keith, all of the expression and nuance in his playing. Um, and I think it all comes together in this one song, and I'm glad that I could share it. I'm glad I could kind of get through it without losing my composure too much. It again, it really touched me, deeply, from a musical perspective. What Keith did with, I think especially on the piano, to really just say that. I mean, as much as I love, synthesizers and his organ playing, just wow, but the piano, the the expressive qualities and the dynamic range and everything, I think that you could really hear just how good his touch was on the piano. And probably somebody like a Herbie Hancock or whatever would say the same thing. I mean, as amazing as some of these people were on synthesizers, and they could do all these great sounds and, expression with the, you know, modulating things with the knobs and all of that. At the end of the day, I mean, you take an instrument like a piano, and that's really kind of what separates the people who can play pretty good, and then the people who can play at the level, of a real concert pianist that you would hear with the symphony orchestra, which is the level that Keith was at. I mean, his musicianship was just impeccable, and it's not surprising that he was probably Rick Wakeman's favorite pianist. They were very good friends, and I think that was something that the two of them, with the bands that they were in, they had that kind of shared experience where they were, sort of similar background, although Keith has more of a jazz flavor in his playing than Wakeman does. But I think that really those two in that arena were kind of above most of everybody else. Not that there weren't a lot of great players. Um, Dave Stewart, not the Eurythmics, the other one was a great player from England also. Um, John Lord on the organ. There's all these great guys, but I mean, when you really, when you want to get into the people who had, just this really refined classical technique on the piano, and were capable of, playing all these, you know, pieces that could range from being like really delicate and nuanced to just being powerful and moving, you know, I think, they were, definitely at the kind of the forefront of that in this style. I don't know. That's how I hear it anyway. And definitely, I think, Keith was kind of my favorite, probably because he had the jazzy elements to his playing too. And it was kind of seamless. Like in this piece, I like Trilogy a lot too, because he sort of shifts gears from the real specific classical kind of romantic style in the beginning of the piece into the jazzy runs where he's playing like basically bebop language on the synthesizer, with some of those great runs and the soloing that he does. And it's just like he just goes from the one to the other. It's seamless. It's like, well, he's equally at home in this style as that style, and you hear it kind of all in this one piece. So that's why I really like this one, and again, that's why I wanted to share it. I think I've probably said everything that I wanted to say about this, so I will wrap up now. But definitely, it's just a listen to it. Just the anyone that's not familiar with this, and I know some people like think, oh, ELP's too over the top or too bombastic or whatever. Listen to this one piece of music by them, and it's like, if nothing else, if you're not a fan of ELP, and not everybody is, I would say this is the piece that points to, gosh, everything that was kind of possible in what they did, when you get it all right. And I think Lucky Man was a good example of that too, even though that's more of like a folk thing that just has the synthesizer on the end. I think some of these things, it's like nobody heard anything like this before. And I think that, that says something that they were, out there exploring new territory. They were pioneers, kind of taking all of these sort of disparate elements and combining them together. I mean, like the romantic classical and kind of the odd meter jazz kind of thing all in one piece. I mean, who else did that? Probably nobody I can think of. I don't know. At least not before them. Maybe after them. Because I think that that's a big reason why I like the music of that era, because you started to see all these people where they would just kind of cross the musical boundaries and experiment and just be willing to take elements that you wouldn't necessarily, if you were really into one style versus the other, you might not think that they would fit together, and then it fits together perfect in this. So again, thanks for watching, and have a great weekend, everyone.